Bring a Trailer podcast.
Welcome to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Tyler here. And as you may be guessing, today's podcast is going to be focused on motorcycles. We have a very special guest today who really exemplifies, in my opinion, motorcycles on the site. The world may know him as a rock guitarist, but here in the BAT world, we know him as Davidlee8. We're going to talk a little bit about music, a lot about bikes, and yes, folks, we are going to get into the real story about those internet-breaking elkskin riding gloves. Mr. David Lee, welcome to the BAT podcast.
Hi, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So a lot of people, I think, know a little bit about you, but what I'm really excited to do today is to provide a little bit more background on who you are and how you got into motorcycles. But first, let's start off with your career as a country rock musician.
Okay. So I grew up in a musical family. My mom played the piano, and my dad got me involved in listening to straight up country pretty much in my younger years. You know, the greats like Willie, Waylon, Johnny Cash, early Elvis. You know, so I had a pretty diverse listening repertoire, what I was getting played at the house, you know, and on the radio and stuff. And so I started taking piano lessons from my mom, and I realized that really wasn't going to be a rock and roll instrument. I was always drawn to guitars and loud guitars, you know, and so I started taking lessons when I was about 12 years old, and then it just sort of changed my life, you know. It just it opened up a lot of doors for me, and I've been performing on and off in bands all my whole life, really.
Now, music isn't the only thing you got from your parents, because your love for BMW motorcycles came from your dad. Isn't that right?
That's right. I was a bicycle kid growing up. I was really into BMX bicycles before motorcycles came on the horizon. So I always loved things with two wheels. I was obsessed with BMX bikes, mongooses, and PK rippers, you know, and Haro freestylers. I've always been obsessive about subtleties about manufacturing, whether it's, you know, the way the tubes look, the paint jobs, you know. I mean, it started, people ask me about this stuff all the time, and I can come by it honestly that it started when I was a kid. I remember someone in my neighborhood having like a really trick mongoose, and I just, every time I would see it, I would just be like, oh, one day I'm going to have one of those, you know. And so it started with the two wheels. I started racing BMX bikes. My dad had a Beamer, and my mother was completely opposed to me having a motorcycle at all. I mean, she told me flat out that I wasn't going to have one. It was non-negotiable. I remember her telling me as I was approaching, you know, 15 years of age, that she would be more than willing to help me get any car that I wanted, but a motorcycle wasn't going to happen. And
I feel like that's a story that gets repeated, I mean, over and over again. Isn't that amazing how so many of us have kind of that same story of our moms not wanting us to ride motorcycles?
I mean, because you know what their first vision in their mind is, you wrapping yourself around a telephone pole.
Yeah, right. And you can't shake them from that.
That's right.
So for me, it was, I can't remember if it was I had to be 21 or I couldn't be living in the house. And just like you, my dad was always interested in motorcycles as well. And then when I was 21, he bought his first motorcycle, a Harley. And she was like, well, now that we have one in the house, there's nothing I can do to keep you from riding it.
That's right.
It was kind of, I then went from there. So when did you actually get your first bike?
Oh, I got it a couple of months after I got my driver's license. Mm-hmm. I kept it at a friend's house, and she saw me riding it down the street with no helmet on. And I remember the conversation at the dinner table where she asked me for the keys, and I said, well, why did I lose the privilege of the car? And she's like, I'm not talking about the car. I'm talking about the motorcycle. My dad just got real quiet. And yeah. And so anyway, we were able to come up with a compromise that as long as I wore my helmet all the time, that we would be okay. And so that was it. I've had one ever since.
And what kind of bike was that?
That was a BMW.
What model? Do you remember?
R50/2.
Okay, /2. So this is kind of getting into your current wheelhouse a little bit of these R50, R60 /2s. I know you've had a couple /5s, maybe an R69S, I want to say, was in there at one point as well. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah, I think I've had pretty much all of them, really. I mean, I love them all. I was talking about an R100 GS to someone, and it used to be the cutoff for me was 1976 when R90S ended. That was kind of the newest BMWs that I was into. But anything prior to that, obsession. I've never had a pre-war bike. I don't know why. It's never happened. But anything from like 1948 to 1976, I've had pretty much everything.
And BMWs are certainly your bread and butter. We definitely see that in the site. You judge them, you're passionate about them specifically, but you're into some other makes as well. What else have you had? What else do you own that you enjoy riding?
I like the British stuff. I found out about Norton's shortly after when I first got into BMWs. I had no frame of reference about motorcycle power, so a slash two felt quick to me because they're fast as the cars were in the 80s, and a friend of mine, my dad's had a Norton Commando 850, and so he let me take that for a ride, and then that opened my mind to wow, there's some other stuff out there besides the BMWs that actually is really kind of cool and sort of beautiful in its own way. So I've owned Nortons, I still own Nortons. The Norton segued me into Vincent's, which that's a whole nother obsession. We could probably talk about an entire podcast about that and chasing those bikes. And then 1970 through 1974 Ducati bevel twins. I love them. They're beautiful. They sound great. So those really are kind of like my primary focus. The reason I keep going back to the BMWs and have stayed with the BMWs all my life is I tell people if you can only have one motorcycle and you're looking for a vintage bike and you want a bike that looks a certain way, that looks old enough, but yet you don't have to be an incredible mechanic to keep it running, and you don't have to like have it on a battery charger all the time, and you don't have to like give it the utmost in care, which is always a good idea. But a BMW will run pretty much no matter what. There can be catastrophic things going on inside of the engine and it still runs. And so that's why I think I like them. I think that's why the general public likes them, because every time someone goes out to ride one, it's going to start. And you can't say that about British motorcycles or cars.
It's interesting that you're talking about the durability of the BMW motorcycle, because that is kind of one of the hallmarks of your auctions and of the bikes that you like to sell, is that you actually go through them in your shop and you prepare them. And I want to say on every auction, you almost guarantee, but you certainly make it clear that somebody can fly in to Charleston, right? And
Absolutely.
ride this thing home anywhere. And some people have. So I guess I'm really curious to hear about your process for prepping one of these bikes for sale and what all goes into that.
I just go through the thing in its entirety as if I was going to be riding it around the country. A little bit comes from my OCD nature. When I was racing bicycles, when I was a younger guy, I prepared my own bikes. I built my own wheels. I prepared the bikes for competition, and people are like, oh, bicycles and not really a motorcycle, but it's similar. There's a lot of things going on, and you're like safety and wellness, it's critical to you finishing the race or finishing the ride. Right. So, I ride the bikes, I buy the bikes, I ride the bikes. Some just stay with me longer than others. Everything's for sale, right? I mean, at some point they'll all leave me, but some I just go, oh, this would be better for somebody else or whatever. So I ride the bike and just making mental notes along the way. This sounds like it needs a little adjustment here. This feels a little weird here. The brake's not great. The clutch slips a little, all the things that you just kind of go through like a mental checklist. And then come back to the workshop, put it up on the lift, and just start going through it from front to back and just making all the corrections and replacing as you need.
Sounds like this is all work that you've been doing for years on your own motorcycles, to actually use them and enjoy them and put some miles on them. When did you decide that you wanted to start moving them via Bring a Trailer?
So 7 years ago, I have a friend who I had seen Bring a Trailer when it was a blog, when Randy was putting the links to other deals he found on Craigslist and that sort of thing, when it was more of just like a blog site, before the auctions came about. And a friend of mine who's still on Bring a Trailer, Jack Handigan, his handle is Little Handigan, was selling vintage Mercedes on there. And he said to me, David, you're a weird character. You're like this rock and roller that like, loves these esoteric motorcycles, and you like to talk to people about the bikes. I think that you would do really well selling some of your bikes on Bring a Trailer. And at that point, I really wasn't, I would occasionally sell motorcycles to friends, but I wasn't like actively like putting stuff up on like Craigslist or Cycle Trader or anywhere else, any of the other like formats to sell stuff online. And so I said, I looked at it and At that time, they were running about, I think you guys are running like 100 auctions a week, and really like maybe one motorcycle a week, if that. And so I had a bike. It was a really low mileage R100 RT. I think it had 5,000 miles. I mean, it was as mint as it gets. I spent a whole day getting a presentation together, sent it off into the cyberspace, and 5 minutes later got back a rejection letter.
It sometimes happens, but you didn't obviously give up there. And you did something that is admirable, and you resubmitted or you reached out and asked questions. How did that process go?
So I got back a pretty basic no thanks, we're not interested in this right now. And so I had actually put on that listing, I had asked for a reserve. So Jack says to me, "Oh, you should have said no reserve. Then they would take it." So I hit reply and said, "Hi," and I introduced myself to whoever was reading it and said, "I have a lot of motorcycles and I really like your website and I like the social media aspect of it. And I love the comment section. And I'd really like to sell a motorcycle on there. I'm willing to re-offer this bike with no reserve or really whatever it would take. I was just ready to do one. And then I think I emailed again, and then I got an email back from Randy, and he said, "Yeah, we're just not doing motorcycles right now at all. We had done them in the past, and we're not doing any right now, but we'll keep you in mind." And I just said, "Well, I appreciate that, but let me show you my shop." So I took an overhead shot of all my bikes and the cars and stuff in here. And I said, I'd love a shot just running any bike in here you see that you like. I'll run it no reserve and let's see how it goes. And he came back and he goes, "Okay, we'll do that." And so we ran my R100 RS Motorsport, no reserve, and it went gangbusters. That was 46 vehicles ago. So I was
Yeah, I'm
like,
not.
finally, yeah. And then, now you run, I don't know, I think the last time I looked, there were like 40 some odd motorcycles on there at one time. It's amazing.
Last time I checked, we had 60 live right now.
60,
Uh,
incredible.
you had to actually remind me that you've been selling at BAT longer than I've been here, because you and I didn't start working together until I want to say like February or March of 2020. And I have to tell you a little bit of a funny story that went on in my head when we first started working together. You
Oh boy.
introduced yourself as you introduced yourself as David Lee, and then you followed up by saying something about you had to go on tour, so there was a schedule conflict, or there was something that you were in the music industry.
Right.
And my first thought was motorcycles, David Lee. Am I talking to the greatest frontman in rock and roll history? Of course, Mr. David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Mr. Roth, but I'm very glad that you turned out to be you, because we've ended up listing a lot of motorcycles. For you, it's been going on 6 years now. And as I'm scrolling through some of your listings, I see the red garage door disappears in a couple of them, but otherwise, for the most part, it is the red garage door for the feature image. How do you think that consistency has helped your brand and kind of helped you build a presence? Because obviously, your presence now is much more significant. It seems to be growing every year.
That's right. And it was just kind of fortuitous. I was like snapping photos. I'm like a definite amateur photographer and always have been interested in photography and was just shooting images outside and thought I was looking for a neutral background, the red bay door, and did it. And early on, I think you see those early auctions were some of the ones next door to my warehouse where I didn't really think much of it, honestly. I was just like happy to get bikes up there at that point. I felt like I was on such thin ice like the first couple of listings, just because it was still kind of like a trial run with motorcycles, that I didn't really want to like say, "Oh, hey, can we use this for my hero picture," or whatever. I just let you guys do your thing. I can honestly tell you, the bikes that you and I worked with, and pretty much 100% all the auction specialists I've worked with have been fantastic. I mean, they listen to you. They certainly appreciate, like what you're going for as a presenter and as a seller. And it always jives. I mean, when you and I locked in, I used to always say, "Hey, let me work with Tyler," because you could always pick exactly what photo I wanted for the hero shot just on your own. I was always like, "Man, we're like connected, dialed up." And
I love that.
yeah, and so you build a relationship, right? I mean, it's all relationship driven, and so after a couple with the red door, people started like commenting like, "Oh, I knew once I saw the red door picture, I knew that was David Lee." And so I just said, you know what, we should just roll with this. And so now everyone is the red door. And it's funny, man. I see other auctions that people put their vehicle in front of a red door, and I mean, I have
Yeah,
to think,
I noticed that too.
yeah.
Is that something that must be something you started? I never saw red doors before your auctions came out.
People have sent me things they grab from different social media sites where it's like fans of mine and people who have some like animosity towards me. I mean, it's really weird, but like I've seen people say that I'm like starting a cult, you know, that I have these weird, you know, it's just like typical internet fodder. But there's always this commenter that says, yeah, if that bike was just in front of a red door, it'd be worth like 30% more. I mean, I see that so often.
Well, part of it, is certainly a testament to what you've built and the presence that you've developed on the site. I think one of my favorite things every time one of your auction comes up, and these days I don't always have a front row seat like I did back in the old days. We've got a whole team of motorcycle specialists who you work with. You probably know all them by name at this point too, and they all enjoy working with you every time something comes across our team desk. It's always a bit of a treat.
Cool.
Um, but you've been a really fantastic member of the BAT community. And that's always been one of my favorite parts of our site and what we've built here and kind of championed throughout the entire growth process is that we really are a community of car, motorcycle, now a lot of automobilia, all these different enthusiasts coming together. And it's not like that that kind of forum where there's a lot of argument. Of course, it's a BMW, so that there's going to be some debate on it. It seems
Always.
to be BMWs just brings out like the greatest debates that I've seen on the internet from
Definitely.
some real expert people.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit about that too.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, what goes into the community aspect, and how do you use that sense of community to navigate your auctions?
Well, you know, just from interacting with me that I'm a people person, right? I mean, I've been in the entertainment business on and off my whole life, and this is sort of a extension of that, right? I mean, you're on a public forum, you're on the virtual stage, and you're sort of ring leading the auction and taking it down the paths. I mean, I feel like it's sort of a runaway freight train when one drops. I mean, I always like, send an email like, hey, before nowadays, you guys let everyone know when the auction's going to drop. But in the old days, it was kind of like you got an email just out of the blue, like, boom, you're live. And so I would always email my auction specialist and be like, hey, can you give me a heads up on when this thing's going to go live so I can get myself mentally in the headspace to get ready to control the reins of this thing, because you got to like get there with your opening statement and then start fielding all the questions. And you're exactly right. The community is unbelievable. I mean, I've made friendships on there with guys I would have never met otherwise that have similar tastes in music or guitars or motorcycles or cars or fishing or all the different things everybody's into. And it's a great bunch of men and women, it really is. And it's a positive virtual society where everybody kind of comes and goes and you get to know everyone's handles, and they message you when you have an auction online and they connect and then you talk on the phone. I've been fortunate with the band. Last year we went out, did 100 shows, toured all of America. And I mean, in New York City, we had like 20 Bring a Trailer guys, that are on Bring a Trailer that came to the gig. They rode their motorcycles. I mean, we could have had a motorcycle show in front of this little club of just guys that have bought bikes from me or know me through the community or bought other bikes on Bring a Trailer. It was like a little reunion in every town. I mean, how often does that get to happen? I mean,
No, that's incredible, and it's great. I was going to ask you about that too because there's a gentleman I want to say from Minneapolis on I want to say your R27 auction that closed earlier,
yeah.
and he asked if you were touring in Minneapolis because he wanted to bring his BMW friends to go park outside the venue and enjoy the show. And I just thought that was kind of like one of the coolest things is that we've got real world community, some music community, motorcycle community, and BAT community all kind of blending together. And these are real people that are, there's obviously real people behind these usernames, and you've had the really, it sounds like mostly pleasurable experience of interacting with a lot of different people. And you keep in touch with a lot of people who purchase your bikes too, don't you?
Oh, continually. I mean, that's part of the thing I always say on my auctions. I just don't build motorcycles. I build relationships. And my phone's on 24/7 for tech questions about their motor. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that bought a bike from me. I mean, it could be somebody who bid on one or just has an interest in BMWs and legitimately has questions about their bikes or another bike they bought on Bring a Trailer or another bike they're looking at and what to look for. And man, I mean, people say to me every once in a while, David Lee, you're a great salesman. And I say, I'm not really a great salesman, man. This is from the heart. I truly love these bikes. And like my band, the Shack Shakers, I love the band. I love our front man. He's a great songwriter. He's a great harmonica player. I only align myself with things that I truly believe in. And I think that when you come in touch with people and you're talking about this stuff, they can sense that it's real. It's no shtick. It's no, he's saying this to try to sell me a bike. It's like they come to my shop, they come in here and see what I do, and they're like, yeah, David Lee loves this stuff, and like, I don't know, it just seems like a good fit for everybody.
Yeah, can you think offhand of any success stories that you've had from sellers? I love, again, I love the idea that on all the auctions I don't know if you're offering to pick people up at the airport, but certainly you're offering that they can fly into Charleston and ride their bike home. Have people been taking you up on that?
Definitely. I mean, it's been a half dozen, and I definitely can scoop them up at the airport, or typically it's easier I'm not far from the airport, so they just grab an Uber. There's a Hilton right next door to my workshop, amazingly, so they can just like literally stay there and walk over in the morning, come have a coffee over here, and like see all the bikes and see my workspace. And then we ride motorcycles around Charleston, and Charleston's an incredible city. It has lots of good eateries, and we have the beaches, and there's all kinds of stuff to do here. And so they come in and take off and ride the bikes out. Then just, I mean, I set them up when they're doing a cross country ride. We may jump on a few things. I mean, I've had a couple of guys who are like, oh, we should probably do the rear main seal on a bike. And so, we have discussions about the process and about me teeing them up to go.
Do you know where the furthest someone has ridden home from? Oh,
Nederland, Colorado on R50 slash
wow.
5.
So Nederland, Colorado,
No
and any problems on the way, or just
no, I don't think he had any problems. He was just dodging weather. He was going to take back roads the whole way, which an R50/5 is not like some of these bikes don't really like to run 85 miles an hour all day long. They're 50 years old, 60 years old. And he ended up zigzagging around and then got out. He went like down south first. He definitely didn't take a straight shot, and then ended up towards like Chicago, and then saw like a big rain front coming in. And so the last like 17 hours he told me he jumped on the interstate and ran it at 80 miles an hour for like 17 hours straight. And I was like, weren't you spinning like 5,800 RPMs at that? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, wow, well, I guess, testament to the bikes again, that it just ran and ran. The little bike.
yeah, what is that? A 498cc opposed twin going at that kind of RPMs?
Yeah, 85 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, 5,800 and up. Yeah. It did perfectly fine. It just seems like a lot to run those bikes, but the Germans were building that stuff to run at higher RPMs, if it had to, and it's getting tons of oil flow, so it's fun.
Yeah, fantastic. So talking about motorcycle rides, you've are no stranger to motorcycle adventures over the years. I'm sure there's a lot of adventures, and we'd love to hear about some. There's one that has been in my mind for, let's see, going on like 4 years now. I had just bought a Ducati ST2, my first Ducati, and I was all excited. And you actually then told me that you had an amazing experience with an ST2 in Italy. Your band had just finished a European tour. You had a little bit of time and a little bit of money, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And you went on what sounded to me like one of the most amazing motorcycle adventures I could ever imagine. And I've been thinking about it, if not daily, certainly weekly ever since.
Yeah, so it was like 2004, pre-iPhone, pre really widespread internet, back in the glory years of music and analog, before you had to like look at maps, and be able to read like where you're going from point A to point B. And we had wrapped a tour in Rome, and we had maybe like 3 weeks off till our next tour. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to stay over here for a while. And I looked into renting a Ducati in Rome and found a place, took a cab over there, and the guy just basically like threw me the keys, and he was like, here you go, man, there's the bike. It was an ST2. It was yellow. It had hard bags, and he just said, bring it back in a week. And so I got thrust into, I was like, coming off tour. So I was a little bit like run down, and, Rome at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, man, is like crazy traffic. I mean, crazy traffic. And I hadn't been driving. We'd been on a tour bus, so I hadn't been driving I'd been over there for, I think, a month at that point. And I just kind of got thrust into 5 o'clock Rome traffic, looking at with a map on the gas tank, trying to figure out. All I knew is I wanted to go south towards the Amalfi Coast, and even just getting out of the city was like maniacal, man. So finally, I got out and I got on the auto. I was like, I'm just going to jump on the Autostrada, and started motoring southbound. And about 2 hours in, I noticed, I felt something on my leg, and I was like, whoa, what is that? I looked down, and it had burst a high pressure fuel line. And it was spewing gas all over my right leg and the header pipe, going like, 120 clicks an hour down the Autostrada. I mean, it's a miracle I didn't go up in flames.
Fuel and a hot head pipe don't go well together.
Yeah, not well at all. So I pulled over on the side of the Autostrada with cars flying by me. There were syringes everywhere on the road. I'm like looking around like, oh my God. I pop open the gas tank. And of course, I because it was sort of a last minute thing for me, I didn't come to the tour like prepared to take a motorcycle trip. So I had like no tools, no nothing. I lift the gas tank up and I find the line where it had gotten pinched in between the frame rail and the tank itself. And I start rummaging through my messenger bag, and I have an Allen key and I have one Allen bolt. Like just randomly, it was like a bicycle water bottle cage bolt that just happened to be in my bag for some reason. Perfectly thread into the bottom of the gas tank to plug the line that was on the main line versus the reserve line. So I plugged off the main line, put the sun starting to go down. I put the tank back on the bike, and it fired up, and I limped it off the interstate and pulled over at the next town, grabbed a hotel room, and figured it. I just like, well, I'll just deal with this tomorrow morning. And the lady at the hotel was like, hey, next door, there's an American guy. He like works on cars. He opens at 8 a.m. Have a dinner and go to bed and go over there and fix it in the morning. And I was like, oh, unbelievable. And that was it, man. Next day I went over there, lifted it up, bought some fuel pressure line from him, some hose clamps, got it back together, and then proceeded to ride that bike down through Salerno, Sorrento, Amalfi. I took it on the ferry over to Capri, all along Napoli, Positano. I mean, it was insane.
Oh man, that story just sounds incredible. My current dream at the moment is a version of that. One of my dream bikes, which I spoke about on the last podcast, is a 87, 88 Passo 750.
Oh yeah.
And, they're not real common here in the US, but they seem to be for sale fairly regularly in Italy. And that would just be amazing to buy one in Italy, ride it around. I don't know if I have to do the full circumnavigation of the boot, but whatever town I pick up the
Yeah, you
bike
can't
in,
go wrong.
no, ride it around for a little bit, drop it off back at the dealership, have them ship it home, and now I've got my bike with a great story to go with it. And a mentor of mine in the motorcycle industry once kind of told me that you never hear about people's beautiful sunny day rides where nothing goes wrong. That just isn't a motorcycle ride.
Yeah.
A motorcycle ride, something has to go wrong and you have to figure it out. And that's kind of the beauty of using a motorcycle. And a lot of old cars are very similar, have very similar stories as well. But that's just always kind of been the beauty of the motorcycle, whether it's weather, getting caught in a snowstorm on your way to Sturgis one year, or Daytona, I suppose, more likely, or having a high pressure fuel hose drop out on you on a rental bike in the middle of nowhere, Italy.
No cell
And you
coverage.
have to figure it out.
Yeah, you just have to. It takes you back to the analog era. When you're on a motorcycle traveling, you are exposed to the elements. There's really no safety net. And there's something to be said about that it shows you, we can do without your iPhone telling you how to get there from A to B, all along. The other thing I want to say real quick about Italy is everyone drives crazy there. And if you're on a motorcycle, you're expected to drive crazy, like all signs, no passing signs, speed limit signs, all just recommendations. So on the twisties, guys come by you on Vespas, you're on this big Ducati, and these dudes on 125cc Vespas come flying by you and yell something at you like, come on, man, like you're on that big bike and you're riding it like you're just putzing along. And at red lights, everyone passes all the cars because they just assume, that you're going to be able to accelerate faster than the cars. So it turns every red light is like a drag race, whether it's like a 50cc Vespa, 1000cc Ducati, BMWs. Everybody comes around the traffic and gets right to the front. And then everybody's watching the light. Nobody's on their phone. And when that light turns green, dude, it is game on. Like it's a drag race. It's unbelievable.
It actually sounds a little bit like California. On my commute in today, I took my car, but man, I love the idea of splitting lanes. I was sitting in traffic, and guys were just flying right by me. They probably made it into town about 20, 30 minutes faster than I did. Looked like a blast. I do it on my ST2 with the bags and trunk, and it just feels like a big elephant, like going through the middle of traffic. So I kind of know what you're talking about. You see guys in some of these narrow hyper motard type bikes, and
Yeah,
they're just threading, and they get it, and they can launch fast. The STs are they're fast and fun bikes, but
they're wild.
they're certainly touring motorcycles.
Yeah. Yeah. And so take California and multiply it by like 100 for the craziness of Italy. Like
Oh
it
man,
makes California seem so tame, man. I mean, it's not taking anything away from the riding in California, but these guys are on a whole nother dimension, man. You'll see. You're gonna make it there one day and be like, David Lee warned me, but it's crazier than I ever thought. I mean, passing on blind turns. I mean, you're just like, man, this is insanity.
oh
You have
man.
to dial yourself back because you get caught up in it and you're just like, man, something bad's gonna happen.
Oh, I love it. And I will definitely, when I do finally pull off that adventure, I'll probably call you for some more advice.
I'll be there.
But otherwise, I appreciate it. Speaking of California, though, we actually are missing you this year, but we have our big weekend coming up on Saturday, May 4th, is the annual Quail Motorcycle Gathering, which you're typically a judge at. Can you tell us a little bit about that event and how you got hooked up with them in the first place?
Yeah, so it's incredible. It's like kind of the top shelf motorcycle event in America, right? I mean, it's beautiful. It's in Carmel. People bring the most beautiful bikes from all over the place, and it's pretty over the top. I mean, it's the real deal if you want to go see the best motorcycles on the planet. And a couple of years ago, Summer Hooker, who's on Bring a Trailer, he's the head judge at the Quail. He and I have been friends for decades, and he just out of the blue one day called me up. He's like, "Hey man, do you want to be a judge at the Quail this year?" And I was like, "Sure." And so it was really that simple. I filled out an application, and they asked like what kind of bikes I was into and that sort of thing. And so then I did it, and that was 2 years ago. They brought me back last year. I did it again, and that's when I saw you guys at the Bring a Trailer had their first presence there, if I believe, for the first year,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And we got to meet finally face to face and talk motorcycles and Bring a Trailer. And then this year I was slated to come, and it's just been so crazy over here with motorcycles and projects and stuff that I just decided to call an audible on this one and pass for this year. But I'm definitely coming back out next year. I mean, I'm already having like remorse about not doing it. I it's that good, right?
Well, you'll certainly be there with us in spirit. I know we had an incredible time last year. We had a spot next to the actual Quail Motorcycle Gathering lawn. We kind of have our own lawn for BAT use.
Yeah.
It's very much ride in with something cool. We've got a lot of great alumni bikes. We meet a lot of users who are bringing their own collector bikes. And surely there was a David Lee appearance there last year. If anybody is curious, we had David interviewed by our videographer. And if you look at the coverage from last year, there's actually you speaking at our event, which was fantastic. So we definitely appreciate you lending your personality to that cause. And yeah, we're definitely going to miss you this year, but it's shaping up to be a good one. We're going to be in our same spot as last time. And if anyone's interested, we would love to have you and get you set up with some BAT swag and hooked up for the event.
Like you said, I'll be there in spirit. Man, it's just a great venue. The lawn is beautiful, and the bikes and the people are incredible. It really is a great time to meet a bunch of the Bring a Trailer crowd as well, because it's close to you guys. So it's
Yeah, it is just about 2.5 hours south of our offices here in San Francisco. But yeah, like you said, you are busy. You currently have a bike live right now. It's the one in front of the red garage door. Is it an actual Paris Dakar, or it's just kind of been modified to look like that?
That's right. We built it into a Paris Dakar style replica with a proper Paris Dakar tank, the seat. It's had a lot of suspension upgrades, and those R100 GSs those are the bikes. If you could pick any bike to tour the world with, like the ST2 or leaving me stranded, the GS will not leave you stranded.
You've done a little bit of overlanding, I'm assuming, on GSs.
Correct. Always on GSs for the most part. I mean, those are my preferred bikes to ride because you can take Jeep roads. You can, they go over anything. You can jump a curb if you need to. You can go in the grass. They've got really substantial side stands. You can park it anywhere. There's all these little subtleties about it that make it a bike to do something like that on. And if with the Dakar tank, it holds 9 gallons of petrol. So, and it's sipping gas. I mean, you've got like a 400+ mile range.
Wow, incredible. So where have you ridden? Anything fun you can share with us?
All out west, Idaho. A friend of mine has a place in Driggs, Idaho, which is just on the Idaho side near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So all over those passes, Glacier National Park, Yellowstone, all up into Montana. I mean, you can't go wrong out there riding around. I mean, it's like no cars, no cell phone reception, uh, wildlife, and just open ranges. It's incredible.
Yeah, I was just actually out in Idaho riding horses this time,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I can definitely vouch for just the vastness, openness. It's just a beautiful part of the country, and another place where I really should just bring a motorcycle next time.
Definitely, or rent one and just ride because, especially along that range there, outside of Jackson. I mean, there's so many dirt roads. You just look at the map and you're like, this looks good. And you take off. And the next thing you know, you're like climbing the side of a mountain and you're going through stream crossings and, it's public land. So you can just go anywhere and come upon like wildlife everywhere, bears, bison. I mean, you name it, man. They're out there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm even blown away by a lot of that here in a lot of parts of California too. I'm an East Coast guy, born and raised, but this concept of out west of this massive public lands and dirt roads, and you can really, the Wild West still is very much in existence out here, which a lot of people out east don't quite realize and don't know about. So
Yeah.
it's definitely ripe for adventure.
Hey, that's the thing about the GS that like, they perform so well on the road too, so it's just the most versatile with a Beamer like a /2 or a /5 Beamer. You're just not going to have those sort of off-road capabilities. Even a Jeep Road's a push for /2 because you're going to have more street tires on it. But a GS with like a 70/30 tire, you can go literally anywhere and it's going to behave great on the paved road. So if you can only have one and you want to do some stuff like that, that's the bike to go with for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if that sounds like something anyone would like to do, I know where you can find one. The other bike that you sold, again, talk about how busy you've been lately prepping these bikes for sale. The other bike that you sold last week was an R27. Now, it sold for 19.5. Is that a record for R27s? I'm not real familiar with ones going that high.
I think there has been a couple that went over 20. I think that, 19 is, there's a big range on the single cylinder bikes and it depends on mileage, condition, originality, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But they didn't make a lot of those to come to America. So you don't see a lot of them, right? And people love them because they weigh 80 pounds lighter than a twin, because the whole chassis is smaller. It has a smaller Earl's fork. So it really is a fantastic in-town, urban cruiser. It's basically like a bicycle with a 250cc engine.
And so now, what about this one do you think kind of sets it apart from some others?
Mostly original paint. I had gone through and done some of the maintenance stuff, the rubbers for the engine mounting system. I did a rear main seal. Gets new tires, the normal stuff. So I think the bidders are going to be positive they know where they're getting.
I kind of wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the current motorcycle market. It's kind of tough to tell because we're dealing with numbers. I mean, like we talked about, a great result for your R27 was 19.5. And so there's only a couple grand maybe that separate it from another example one way or another. We're not talking about Ferrari Daytonas where you can see what the market is doing because they're changing hands at differentials of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
What's your take on the current motorcycle market?
I think that people are interested, for sure. There's a lot of new faces coming over to the motorcycle sector. Uh, I think a lot of it is because of Bring a Trailer. I mean, Bring a Trailer has shifted the interest in these vehicles. I mean, I'm sure you know better than I do, but being able to have a venue like you offer is a huge advantage for people wanting to get into vintage motorcycles or vintage cars, right?
It's definitely true. We try to make it as easy as possible, but we also get a lot of really fantastic examples that come our way.
It's hard, I think, to put relative exact numbers on the trajectory of the BMW marketplace or any vintage motorcycle marketplace, because what do we have for data, right? Bring a trailer results or eBay or other online auction formats. And it's very difficult to get a full realization about what they're doing because, you know, a lot of an auction is dependent on the seller. That was something we were talking about earlier. Like if somebody's presenting something that's out of their wheelhouse, they may not get the same. They might be a great vehicle, and if another person was selling it, it might get 20-30% more, right? So I see people and they reference some of the results on Bring a Trailer, like, oh, I think that the BMW market is down, or I think that why was this result so bad versus why was this result so good? And I don't get to look at every single auction that goes on Bring a Trailer, but I do follow a lot of other sellers' auctions just because I'm curious and like how the auction's going. And a lot of the result at the end of the day is the dynamic of the seller interacting with the buyers, and then the way the vehicle's presented, riding videos, all the sorts of things that, like, I mean, I see people ask questions on certain auctions and the seller doesn't respond for like 3 days. I mean, that would leave some question marks in my mind, why I'm not getting the photograph or a video or something to explain to me what's going on, right?
One of the things that I was really excited to have you on this podcast for also is, you're a private party enthusiast selling motorcycles. What kinds of advice can you give to other people who maybe want to sell their first motorcycle, but they haven't built up that reputation? Obviously, they're selling their first bike. They don't have the name brand. What are some things that they can do to get started and achieve kind of that greatest level of success?
Well, first off, the key is transparency with the vehicle and yourself, and about what's been done to the bike, and properly presenting it so the potential buyers know what they're getting. And that's like, I mean, that's like 101 for any auction, right? You would think that would be 101 for any auction. And then being active in the auction listings, uh, sorting out all the details that the vehicle needs before bringing it to auction. Whether you're doing it or you're paying someone to do it or whatever. I mean, be so good they can't ignore you, right? It's like Steve Martin said.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and that's just the key to success with it, is just bring the good stuff and be honest, and then the bidders are going to follow.
Now, do you have I think you mentioned 47 auctions, one of which was a BMW 2002.
That's right.
Uh, do
My
you
own
have
car.
that's right, your own car? That was you and I worked together on that one too.
That was such a great car.
Any regrets, or are you happy with the way everything turned out?
Yeah, I mean, cars eat up a lot of room. My warehouse is 2,500 square feet. You can put a lot of motorcycles in there, but not a lot of cars. I mean, somebody else wanted it more than I did.
Yeah, it was a fantastic car. Did you do any of the similar kind of work to prep that one as you do with bikes, or was it basically just kind of a car that was ready to go?
It was ready to go. I put miles on it and shook it down and made sure, I put things through their paces, hot starting, cold starting, driving it hard. How does it behave? All the things. How does it behave in bumper to bumper traffic? How does it behave at high speed? You just put it through all the potential scenarios that it could have. And so, like I said, you go to that mental checklist and go, okay, that's good. That's perfect. Oh, that was a little weird. That might need a little bit of attention. So I just go through it so methodically that, I can, without doubt, whenever I bring something to Bring a Trailer, I know that it's ready to go. Right. I have 100% faith in what I bring. And I tell people that. I'm like, I stand behind the bikes, man. If you don't like it, like, send it back. But nobody's taking me up on it yet.
I love that. Just throwing it all out there, and that is, to be honest, from my experience too. That's a really good point of having having your vehicle prepped and ready. So this is not something that should be done during the auction. Certainly not something that should be done after someone purchases it. We definitely recommend following the David Lee approach. And when you compare motorcycles to cars, it really is. I don't want to say easy, because any kind of maintenance can be challenging, especially when you're dealing with old stuff.
There's a lot less systems going on, right?
Maybe that's what it is.
No
Yeah.
air conditioning, no heating, no cruise control. I had the exact same thought the other day thinking about running cars on Bring a Trailer, about like how much more effort it is to do a car than a motorcycle. I was a greenhorn with the green, going with the green car. I was a greenhorn with that, doing it. And I was like, geez, this thing takes so much time getting a listing together, right?
Whenever I have to work on my cars, it's like it's a process for every single thing, and nothing ever seems to quite go together properly.
Yeah.
Yet with bikes, it's almost like a model where just everything kind of comes out the way it's supposed to and it goes back in the way it's supposed to. I don't know if that's just a familiarity thing or if that's just kind of the advantage of working on them and the way they're designed. I have such a blast working on bikes. In fact, I unfortunately spend a lot more time working on bikes than I do riding them. I'd like to get to a point maybe more like you where you do a little bit of both. But yeah, it's so much fun in it, and I hope that you have fun with a lot of that prep work with the working, even if you're having to replace and clean oil slingers. I
Right.
know that's always the biggest thing on BMW
That's
auctions.
right. Yeah, and I love it, man. It's like therapeutic for me. I work in the
Mm,
shop by myself. I have music on. It's quiet in here. The door's locked. There's no distractions, and I have a coffee machine. Then I'm drinking espresso and listening to music and just cranking away. And it's very rewarding. I tell people it's like you know, when you're around the holidays, people are putting together jigsaw puzzles. And like when you finish a jigsaw puzzle, you're like, God, that's amazing. You look at it. And so I'm like, imagine taking boxes of motorcycle parts and putting it all back together and then being able to ride the thing. It's that sense of reward. And they don't all come as basket cases, but same kind of thing, taking stuff off, cleaning it, rebuilding the motor, putting it back together. It's a good sense of accomplishment. You hit the nail on the head too about the bikes. You can just put the Ducati up on the center stand and you're like kind of ready to go with a car, lifts, big jacks, dangerous, falling, I mean, it's like a million things to it.
If you ride old bikes, even if you ride new bikes, there's going to be a situation where you're on the side of the road and you're going to have to figure something out. These are not the kinds of things that AAA can just tow you to a local shop somewhere. I've broken down with cars in nowhere, Wyoming, nowhere America, you might say.
Right.
And it's like there's a Chevy dealer there. Uh, when it comes to a bike, who's going to work on the bike that you have? But especially when it comes to some of this vintage stuff, I mean, you really have to be able to do it yourself because even if there is a shop, who knows if they know how to work on a slash two?
Fortunately, they're simple and the stuff is available, and there's a great network of online retailers dealing with the vintage BMW stuff. So you can, if you break down somewhere, you just post up for a couple of days and get something, get a new condenser or set of points, or if you didn't come prepared, just get the stuff shipped in and take out a screwdriver and get after it, and then you're back on the road.
Well, yeah, I mean, bikes actually come with a toolkit.
That's right.
That's something that a lot of car people think is maybe kind of funny, but pretty much everything that comes in, whether it's a Honda or a BMW, whatever comes in that toolkit, you should be able to repair just about anything on your bike with that toolkit.
And it's that simplicity that attracts me to the old motorcycles and bicycles, right? It's really just a bicycle with an engine.
Do you have anything new at the moment that you like to ride or that you own?
A new motorcycle?
Yeah, anything from the
Do it.
last 20 years or so? Yeah.
No, nothing new. The newest bike that I have is a GS, an R80 GS. That's a 1984.
Sure. Okay.
That's the newest one. I don't like the new stuff. I mean, a guy came over to my shop last night and he just got a new Ducati Hyper Motard. I don't know. I think it's 800cc single or something. And I didn't even ride it. It only had 50 miles on it. But I just, twisted the throttle and I don't know. It's not me.
They just go,
I just,
it's
yeah,
like,
like a
where's the fun in
computer.
that?
It feels like a computer. It sounds
I
like
was,
a computer.
what really sounds like a computer. I was on my commute in today. I was on the highway, and a Zero, an electric motorcycle, pulls up next to me.
I
What
haven't seen
what are your
it.
thoughts there?
I
What are your
haven't
thoughts
seen it.
on electrified motorcycles?
I think that I'm going to be pushing daisies before we run out of gasoline. I'm not going to be on an electric motorcycle. I don't think.
Well, but before that time comes, before the pushing daisies days come your way, you've got to clear something up for us.
Okay.
What's the story behind the famous internet breaking tan riding
My
gloves,
welding gloves.
the elk skin gloves.
My
Where
welding
did those come
gloves.
about? I feel like this is a thing on all of your auctions.
I mean, so all my years of racing bicycles, I never wore gloves. Okay. People race bicycles. They think you're going to crash. You wear gloves to protect your hands. I mean, you would think that I would try to protect my hands to play the guitar. But I never liked the way the gloves felt when I was holding the handlebars. Right. So I just went for it. And did I lose skin on my palms? Definitely. Did it ever like keep me from playing the guitar? No. Did it ever like do any of that? No, no, no. So therefore, that sort of carried over that when I get on a motorcycle, I like to feel the handlebar grips in my hands. It's just like a weird acquired thing, right? So I never wore gloves on the motorcycle, even. I mean, even when it was cold, I never wore gloves. I just toughed it out and just went no gloves. So my first auction on Bring a Trailer, I was doing the riding video and somebody started saying like, hey man, all the gear all the time, and giving me grief about like riding the bike and filming with no gloves on. So I came back in the shop and, I weld, I build things that require TIG welding, modifications on bikes or subframes or whatever. And so I just like grabbed my TIG gloves and I was like, well, these are better than nothing, I suppose. And so I do the video with the welding gloves and there you go. It just, everybody started being like, whoa, I love those. I bet that's a really good feel on the handlebars and stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's not bad. And so it just kind of stuck. And so now every time I just wear the same old gloves and people want to buy them.
I remember that. Didn't someone
Offered.
suggest doing a charity auction for the
No, we need
welding
to
gloves
run.
at some
We've
point?
been threatening to run the original elk skin TIG gloves, its own auction. Probably go 5 figures.
Yeah, well, we would love that if it was for charity.
That's
That would
right.
be
We can get
fantastic.
when I'm ready to turn those babies loose. We're going to do a charity, and we'll run an auction. 100% goes to a good cause. Definitely, I'm interested.
Maybe we'll start talking about it when you hit 100 auctions.
Okay, deal. When I get to 100, the gloves are going bye bye.
I did want to talk to you too about the level of expertise that is present on BMW motorcycle auctions on BAT. I'm just blown away all the time. I mean, we have some people, and I'm sure you know a lot of them personally. We have some fantastic users who just know more than I think I could ever hope to forget about these bikes. What's that experience been like, having so many experts and this broad array of knowledge all in one place?
Well, it's a testament to the brand, right? That these guys have been into BMW for decades and have seen the progressions from the slash twos onward. And you know, they love talking about the bikes. And I think that even if it comes across like that they're nitpicking your bike, I think it comes from a place of just genuine, they're just sharing their wealth of knowledge with everybody else. I think they just love the machines and they just want to talk about it.
The BMW debates will continue, which I hope, because I love watching them, love seeing them. A massive amount of respect is obviously had for each other because, David, like you were saying, a lot of people know each other personally outside of BAT. So I love when the debates remain respectful and we can debate what 14 millimeter bolt was the correct one used for 1962.
Oh, it's not going anywhere. It's what keeps things spicy in the comment section. It's amazing.
What do you have coming up this summer, kind of riding season? Are you attending any shows? Are you judging anywhere? Are you performing at all where people can come and see you and park their bikes outside?
We don't have any tours on the books yet. We went at it pretty hard last year. I was at the Meltdown rally last weekend up in Hendersonville, North Carolina. My Norvin won Best British bike, 1953 Norton with the 1948 Vincent motor in it. Took first place in the British stuff. My first Vincent's coming to Bring a Trailer. Black Shadows coming up in the next month or so. I've got a really cool 1959 Norton Dominator that's coming up. I've got some more great BMW stuff coming up. So I'm just going to steady on, just kind of keeping some cool stuff coming, trading hands, and keep flying the flag.
What's a great way for people to follow you? I know you've got a great Instagram account. You mentioned the Norvin, and I have seen that bike on your Instagram account. So if anyone else would like to see that, check out David Lee's Insta, and he will tell us what it is
Yeah,
and where else we can find him.
it's MRLEE00, Mr. Lee 00. And that's really the only social media site that I'm on other than Bring a Trailer.
Okay, fantastic.
I like that because it's a good place to put up photographs and stuff that inspires people. Or I go on there to get inspired, and there's not a lot of like ranting and raving about politics and all the other stuff. It's just motorcycles and just inspirational photos to get your juices flowing and get out there and build some motorcycles and ride.
We'll have links to your Instagram account as well as your seller history and some of the other things that we've talked about here on this podcast under the podcast tab on the website. And that's also where folks can comment, discuss. Like I said, check out those links. David, maybe we'll even see you pop in there if folks have questions. Other than that, as always, you can reach out to us directly at podcast@bringatrailer.com for any feedback, questions, concerns, comments, who you want to see on the podcast next. David, this has been fantastic talking with you.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, it's always great to talk to you guys. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to working with you guys over the next however many years we're rolling.
Yeah, hopefully many, many years.
Thanks so much, man. Have a great one.